Now, if you ask me, the level of political debate in this country has been heading firmly for the gutter for quite some time now. This weekend, though, it seems to me, it's crawled resolutely into it. Labour, in the last couple of days, has published a series of attack posters accusing Rishi Sunak of being soft on crime. I wonder if you've seen them. They've been doing the rounds, to put it mildly, on social media. The first asked people whether they thought adults convicted of assaulting children should go to prison. And below that question was the answer from Labour: Rishi Sunak doesn't. Another claimed the Prime Minister didn't think illegal gun owners should be behind bars. And a third accused him of thinking thieves shouldn't be punished. Now, not at all surprisingly, in my view, there has been a pretty major backlash, not just from Labour's opponents, but also from all part of that party. John McDonnell, for example, former Shadow Chancellor, writing on Twitter, "This is the sort of politics a Labour Party confident of its own values and preparing to govern should be engaged in. Please withdraw it. We, the Labour Party, are better than this." And David Blunkett, on the opposite end, the complete opposite end of the Labour Party, writing in the Daily Mail today, saying, "Once you resort to personal abuse, you create the risk that Britain's public discourse will degenerate ever further when baseless allegations and spurious slurs replace fair and robust political debate. Not only is the standing of our leaders undermined, but the very foundations of our democracy are compromised." I couldn't have put it better myself. And yet it seems Labour is having none of it. According to multiple reports today, the party is doubling down. They say they need to win, and if that means fighting dirty, so be it. They've spoken to counterparts in America and Australia, and that is the message that they've taken from those conversations. In one report, under a headline, "Labour's plan to keep dirty tricks going until the next election," a senior party source is quoted as saying that Labour has decided to go for it after a series of personal attacks on Keir Starmer. They've decided, in other words, to fight dirty fire with dirty fire. And I wonder what you make of that. Rather than trying to rise above it all, as I think they tried to do, to be fair, for a while, Keir Starmer's team have crawled down off the curb and got into the gutter too. Seems pretty clear to me that the run-up to this election is going to be beyond dirty. It's going to be filthy in the terms of the debate that we are going to see. And I wonder whether you think that matters. I wonder whether you think it's all fair game, that personal attacks and spurious slurs, as David Blunkett puts it, are fair game in the high-stakes competition that is electoral politics, and that both sides, maybe you think, are as bad as each other, and that this sort of thing is just something that we should expect and accept when it comes to the battle for power. I don't think that. I don't think that at all. I think these posters from Labour are an absolute disgrace. You can attack the government over its record on crime without claiming, ludicrously and deeply offensively, that Rishi Sunak believes child abusers shouldn't be in prison. You can fight hard but still fight fair. And I think this simplistic, childish, spurious drivel demeans our politics and demeans those making it, degrades our politics, and ultimately makes this country a worse place. We have a country that I fear is becoming increasingly divided, more and more hostile, more and more intolerant. And rather than trying to bridge those divides and heal those wounds, as good leaders do, what our current crop seem intent on doing is driving wedges ever deeper into them. We have to be able to disagree, all of us, to criticise, to call things out, without resorting to personal slurs and character assassination. And I think now both main parties have failed woefully in that task. So the idea to me that it's somehow in everyone's interest, or anyone's interests, for our leaders to be trading these pathetic attacks absolutely baffles me. Don't get me wrong. I understand why Starmer is outraged by the attacks on him. Boris Johnson's suggestion that he allowed Jimmy Savile to get away with his crimes was shameful. So was Rishi Sunak's claim that he was on the side of people traffickers. And you call me naive, but two wrongs don't make a right. And if you take part in a race to the bottom like this, you don't just demean yourself and degrade our politics ever further, but you stop being a possible solution to those problems and you start being part of the problem. George just texted straight away, where was all this complaining about dirty politics when Boris Johnson accused Keir Starmer of not prosecuting Jimmy Savile? There was outrage from all sides of the political spectrum at that claim, and rightly so. But you can't, on the one hand, say you're outraged about that and not be outraged when Labour claims that Rishi Sunak doesn't believe that child sex offenders should be in prison. They are both as bad as each other. They are untrue. They are nonsense. They are deeply offensive. And we have the right, I think, to demand better from our politicians than that sort of drivel. They need to grow up. They are leaders. They set the tone for our national debate, and the tone they're setting right now is well and truly in the gutter. I don't think that going after Rishi Sunak in the language they have done will win them many votes at all. Might be wrong, but I suspect that is what will happen. Because you get people like Phil. Phil, thank you for your call. Phil and Sidcup. You get people like Phil saying, well, it just puts me off because people want an opposition that rises above it, that gives them a sense of hope, of optimism, that things can be better. And when they see Labour just lowering itself to the same rhetoric that we've seen in recent weeks levelled at Keir Starmer, it's much harder to make that case, isn't it? It's much harder to convince people like Phil that there is a genuine alternative, not just in terms of policy, but in terms of how they do politics. And Keir Starmer did offer that when it was the contrast with Boris Johnson. He spoke a lot about honesty and integrity and decency and restoring that to public life. And that's part of why I think Labour's still so far ahead in the polls. But how long is that poll lead going to last if on one hand they promise honesty and integrity, on the other put out poster after poster that just chucks untrue lies and slurs at the Prime Minister? You can't argue you're going to do things differently on the one hand and then do the complete opposite and demonstrating that you're going to stoop just as low and make personal attacks that are untrue about your counterpart, your opposition, like the Tories, like Boris Johnson did, like Rishi Sunak's done. And to those texting in, and there's a few saying, why didn't you call this out when Boris Johnson did? I did, and I continue to do so. The slurs that Boris Johnson made about Jimmy Savile were horrific, were despicable, were barely worthy of comment. They were so low. They were so gutter politics. Same with Rishi Sunak claiming Keir Starmer is on the side of people traffickers. I do call it out, and I did call it out. And I'll call it out when Labour does it too, because I think it's just as bad as whoever's doing it. And nobody benefits from that sort of political debate.